Welcome back, legends. I hope you're all fantastic. It is time for another installment of Friday Q&A. Back onto the classic programming. I got back from New Zealand on Monday. I was in no state to film a Q&A video on the regular Monday time slot. So here we are on Friday. In fact, it's Good Friday. If you celebrate Easter, happy Easter. If you don't celebrate Easter, I hope you've got the day off to play guitar and make a bunch of guitar noises. I am going to do my best to get to a bunch of your questions today. As always, if you'd like me to answer one of your questions on the next Q&A video, simply put them in the comments section below. And if you like what I'm doing here on the channel, you can buy some of the music that I make with my band Ragdoll. We've even got a double splatter LP that you can see over there. I highly recommend it. Or you can get exclusive content on my Patreon. It's linked in the video description. There are also some affiliate links. If you want to buy some strings and chuck Uncle Leon a couple of bucks, you can do that as well. But for now, let's tear into these questions. I did a video with my new PRS, the CE24 standard Saturn, during the week. A couple of questions popped up on that video. I had mentioned that I bought a black 1993 CE24 a few months ago. How would I compare this newer CE to the 90s version? The 90s version is actually being refretted at the moment. So hopefully I'll have that one back soon so I can do a side-by-side comparison, because there are some marked differences between the newer CEs and the old school CEs. This is also a CE standard, so it's all mahogany, whereas the old CE that I have has the classic maple cap on a standard mahogany body. But basically the older CEs have exactly the same body shape as the customs, whereas the newer CEs have a slightly different carve. They're kind of in between like the SE, the S2, and the core models on there. But you know, this is still a USA made PRS. It plays amazingly well. I love the sound of it. These 8515 pickups are great. The older CE24 has the 5-way rotary, and I'm pretty sure it has the HFS vintage bass set, which sounds very different. Neck is different. There's a load of different differences on there. Different differences, that's a really, really good set of words that I put together, because English is hard. Me fail English? That's impossible. Nevertheless, I will do that video when I've got the 93 CE24 back from Tim at Williams Guitars. I'm really excited to have that one back and to put it side by side with this one. On the topic of PRS guitars, I think this would make a really good standalone video, the different neck shapes, and doing a side-by-side, like when I do a video demo about a particular guitar, like say this guitar, putting it side-by-side with, say, my McCarty and Custom or DGT, and just sort of giving you a visual of the differences in the neck dimensions. This has a very different neck to the DGT, which has a very different neck to, say, my Single Cut and McCarty on there. Again, you can quantify these things, but so much of it comes down to the feel. While I've been enjoying this one sitting down, I loved it when I gigged it last night. I had a last-minute filling gig, and it just fit like a glove. It's like the best Strat style neck ever. So I'll do those two videos. Let me know if there's any other specific things you would like to see when I do those videos, because these are great guitars. The bolt-on PRS models are easy to overlook, but they can be had for great bargains if you hunt around. Next question comes from a long-time subscriber, friend of the channel, Tim. I know you're recovering from an injury at the moment, Tim. I'm thinking about you, mate. It always makes me smile to read your comments on my videos and read your anecdotes about all the old war stories about playing guitars. So you asked about in-ear monitoring for people who are either hard of hearing or who have suffered some hearing loss from basically just abusing their ears, gigging over all the years. This is an interesting one, because using in-ear monitors when you're used to the experience, it's a very different experience, being able to basically have the same sound everywhere you go on the stage, but it's very different to like amps and cabs in a room. I think there is the tendency to want to crank them up and make everything super loud if you're used to playing at even moderate concert volumes, because having headphones in, even if they're really nicely sealed, you know, the gig goes on and you're like, yeah, I'm digging this, turn it up, loud is more good. Loud is more good. That always happens. So I am not aware of any long-term studies looking at like specifically in-ear monitoring for musicians, but I do know there was some anecdotal stuff that I've heard, and, you know, like AirPods and phones and iPods and all that kind of stuff. I can't remember if there's any conclusive evidence where listening to music way too loud on your in-ear monitors is going to damage your hearing, but I can't see why it wouldn't. So if you do want to make that change, I think if you use them correctly, it can definitely be a lot healthier for your hearing. I know using in-ears, my ears basically don't ring when I get back from gigs, which is not a feeling I miss from gigging, like a Marshall and a boogie and cranking stuff and being an absolute moron in my 20s. I like it when I can get home from the gig, put my head on the pillow when I get into bed and not have that ringing in there. Following on from the last Q&A, we talked about work-life music balance in there. This was a great point that was brought up by Jake Stewart, who sort of mentioned if you're a musician or a creative person, it's really important to go out and have life experiences because those life experiences will inform your music. They will inform your art. And when I think about any piece of music that I've written or any song lyrics that I have written, they've all drawn on experiences that I've had in my life. And a lot of the time, they have helped with me deal with particular problems or issues or just processing emotions in my life and, going through the human process that is basically just being a human being, living your life. So if you're worried that, oh, I can't go out with my friends and have a hamburger because I need to practice, because I need to be like Paul Gilbert. No, go and have that hamburger, have a fun time with your friends, go out, laugh, joke, cry, do all those things that make us human beings. And then when you do pick up your guitar, you've got a bunch of experiences that you can draw on to inform your art. If you've seen the title of this video, hopefully you've just clicked on the timestamp so you can come straight to this one and get into the meat of it. It's how my Q&A videos work, and it's why I like to do timestamps. But pieces of gear that I think are ridiculously overpriced. I'm first going to qualify my criteria here by saying that these pieces of gear I don't think are particularly rare or particularly distinctive in the thing that they do. Basically, they have become desirable for, either celebrity association or somebody has used them on a classic record, or for whatever reason, they've just kind of become a cool piece of gear or they've been memed by someone. They've suffered the Josh Scott effect. So I'm going to go through 5 pieces of gear that immediately came to mind. The first one, and this totally baffles me, is the Ibanez TS10 Tube Screamer. It doesn't baffle me that the association with John Mayer has made it really popular because lots of people love John's guitar playing. John's a fantastic guitar player. Lots of people love John's music. I'm not particularly that into John's music. Every now and then I don't mind a song or two, but the idea that basically a Tube Screamer can become super desirable when you've got a million Tube Screamer and Tube Screamer variants out there is kind of weird. Furthermore, I think the TS10 is super ugly, and it seems like one of those pedals that, if you've got it on your pedal board and you put a photo of your pedal board up on Instagram, you're going to get a bunch of people just going, yeah, fire emoji, awesome, bro. So I just don't get that when you can just go and buy a Maxon or an Ibanez or a cheap clone off of Amazon or something like that will do the exact same job. But again, maybe I can understand that as guitar players, we just kind of want to look cool sometimes. And, I would never want to signal to anyone that John Mayer is my favorite guitar player, but I also don't want to yuck anyone's yum. If John Mayer is your favorite guitar player and you've got a TS10, let me know in the comments section below about why it really is worth the price that you see them go for. On that, another pedal that comes to mind is the Analog Man King of Tone. And this is basically a pretty desirable drive. It sounds good. A lot of people like the King of Tone circuit, but they're kind of made in small numbers and there's a very, very long waiting list. So what you see is you kind of have similar things happen with stuff like the Fractal units where, there's a waiting list and people don't want to wait on there because the waiting list is blown out to years now. It's quite ridiculous. So people will pay a big premium to jump the queue just to get the King of Tone. And again, it's one of those pedals that has been cloned and there's a bunch of different variations out there. It's kind of its own thing now, the blues breaker style drive, as a lot of people would call it. It is a great sounding pedal. I've tried an original King of Tone and I thought it's pretty awesome, but the prices that you see them go for just to jump the queue is absolutely ridiculous. But kudos to Analog Mike for at least just selling them pretty much for the same price as long as you're on the waiting list. So the price of the King of Tone, if you're willing to wait, hasn't really gone up in real terms. In fact, with the price of everything going up, it's probably come down in relative costs. So yeah, the King of Tone, the TS10, another pedal that I see go for ridiculous prices. And I will qualify it and say that it is a super cool series of pedals, and there's sort of nothing else like them out there. It is different to the TS10 and the King of Tone out there with the available clones, but it is the big box Moogafuga or Mugafugga pedals out there. I have demoed the Ring Mod. It's amazing. It's such a fun pedal. The analog delay I've used quite a lot. If you listen to the Ragdoll All I Want Is Everything EP, there's a bunch of the analog delay self-oscillating under a bunch of songs. Listen to the song All I Want right at the end. You can hear it going nuts. Super cool pedal, but again, the prices they go for, thousands of dollars, it's pretty ridiculous. But at least with that one, the build quality is great. The sound is great. It's kind of unique. A lot of the pedals in that, including the filter, are super sweet, and I'm looking forward to the Past Effects version, especially of the filter coming out. I think a lot of people are going to dig that one. Another one that comes to mind, and you can see three of them back here, and I am probably to blame for some of the inflation in the price here, the ADA MP1. As much as I think the ADA is a great sounding unit, and it's kind of cool and niche in the way it's got the soft buttons on there, you used to be able to pick those up for a few $100 maximum until a few years ago. This is the story, I guess, of post-pandemic used gear prices, right? The MP1, the 5150, even Marshall DSLs, you could get them for pocket change. And now I see them sell in Australia for like $1,500, $1,800. I love the ADA, but it's not that good. I don't think it's worth that money at all. It is kind of unique, and if you're a collector or you want to relive the late 80s, early 90s, it's kind of fun in that regard, but you can get that sound for much, much less. It's just basically a tweaked out Marshall circuit. And yeah, the soft buttons and the way it works and the fact that it's MIDI programmable is pretty cool. But if you have a tube head out there that's got a Marshall style circuit, maybe just get a Boss SD1 or a GE7 and plug it into that, and that will give you the difference in pre-EQ. You can get a great boosted Marshall tone out of it. But again, that's not the point of having a whole bunch of gear, right? I've got an original MP1 that belonged to my dad that he bought new, so that's definitely got some sentimental value. I've got a 3-tube modded MP1 that I prefer the sound of, and then I've got a 110 volt MP1 stock that I'm going to mod and do something else to. So I reckon they look really cool, but again, are they worth the big premium that they command? Probably not. And while I'm being an absolute hypocrite, the last piece of gear that I will put on this list are 70 Strats. The price on 70 Strats has gone up a lot recently. They're starting to command almost proper vintage guitar prices. And I've got a 1977 Fender that I love, but it has been heavily reworked and modified. New pickups, it's got the Sir ML pickups in it, new electronics. It's had a stainless steel refret from Tim at Williams Guitars. Tim even re-radiused the fretboard because I think it was something ridiculous like 5.8 inches or something like that, like way off, way off spec. So I think it's closer to a classic like 7.5 or 8 radius on there now. There's just a bunch of really poor manufacturing practices going on it. Like the Skunk Stripe has a big router like miss on it where you can see they've slipped with it and just filled it. The board is really inconsistent in places. You could drive a truck through the gap between the neck and the body. In its stock form, not a great guitar and definitely not worth the thousands that it commands. You could go and buy any other Strat style guitar for a lot less money, particularly like a Fender made in Japan or made in Mexico if you want it to say Fender on the headstock or anything else. But yeah, the 70 Strats, they are kind of dogs. You can put a bunch of work into them, but if you think of the cost of a 70 Strat now, plus a set of Sir MLs and a stainless refret and a plec and new hardware, you may as well just spend all that money on a Sir or an Anderson to get started. Like, start with it right before you fix it. That is it for today's Q&A video. If you've got questions for the next Q&A, put them in the comments section below. Let me know what pieces of gear you think are maybe a bit overpriced or crazy or you just don't get in the comment section below. And I'll see you all next time. Thanks for watching.